Hi, I'm Jeff Larson, Health and Safety Director with Electric Conduit Construction.
And I'm Dr. Odishu with the Chicago Fix Mobile. I'm a primary physician, but I have a big concentration on sports injuries. I actually traveled with sports teams from the minor league level down. And so what I'm doing is I'm taking that sports injury experience, that on-field experience, and I'm bringing it to a job site. It's the same kind of acute and chronic injuries that I would see with some of my players that I'm seeing on these job sites.
So Electric Conduit came together as management when we identified the problem with our soft tissue injuries. We wanted to take an outside-the-box thinking approach here. So we decided to contact Dr. O with the Chicago Fix Mobile. We heard about his services in the industry, and we decided it would be a good idea to try them out. And so far, I think the results have been fantastic. Guys are really using it. They're taking this stuff seriously, and they're doing their part to prevent their injuries. The
Chicago Fix Mobile has been around for about 2 years, and it's kind of been a proving ground for us. The proof of concept was to be able to get into a group and to see if we can actually prevent injuries. Not only treat the acute injuries, but then also minimize the effect of chronic injuries on workers.
All right, so now we're going to show you guys some techniques. Dr. O here is going to help coach us and show us what the proper lifting technique is for some of these items. All these items should look familiar to you guys. You guys use these things every day, so make sure you pay attention to the technical approach to the lift.
So one of the best tips that I can always give to people out in the field is to have a plan whenever you're lifting. Plan out where you're going to lift to, how many steps it's going to take. If it looks like it's going to be a long distance, break that lift up into parts. And so that way it's not a constant strain on the back. Here's another common scenario that we'll see on a job site, is that we have something that's very heavy, that's far back in a bed, or in a position that somebody has to hyperextend or extend out in order to grab. My best suggestion is to actually bring the weight as close as you can to the edge and then lift from there. So what Rick's done is brought it a little bit closer to the edge, and now he's going to be able to lift it right from the edge. And he's also going to lift straight up and then turn with his entire body, not just with his upper body. Another way to really hurt your back is to have a heavy weight and then just turning with your upper body to it. And then bend down with his knees in order to lift that up. Then he's going to turn with his entire body and not just his upper body, putting less strain on his lower back and then dropping it. Another thing about planning out your lift is to use stages appropriately. If you have something that's heavy, that's sitting on a bed, and then you have another lower but not all the way to the ground area, you can actually lift that weight from here to another level and then from there to the ground. Another tip that I always like to give everybody is make sure you're breathing when you're lifting. To hold your breath in, it increases the core pressure, and that's always going to pop out at the weakest link, which is usually down by the pelvis or by the umbilical or inguinal. That's how you get your hernias. And so to minimize those kinds of things, I always suggest make sure that you're breathing when you're lifting. So one of the best tips about lifting is just making sure that you're going to get whatever weight it is as close to your body as you can. And especially you don't want to be lifting with something far away from you and turning with it. So what I always suggest is to get right above whatever you're lifting. Hugo, you want to show them how you can do that? Good. One of the things I wanted to show now is proper lifting angle. You want to get the weight under you as much as you can, and you want to lift straight up. You don't want your back to be angled at all. So what we're going to do is I'm going to just show you that his back is way too far out, and what he should be doing is rolling his butt forward and lifting straight up. I just want to make sure that people aren't lifting like this. And I mean, even with their butt sticking out like that, they shouldn't be lifting, because what they'll end up doing is they'll end up hyperextending their back. And so that's, even though they think they're lifting with their knees are bent, they're still just hyperextending their back. And so what I want to do is I want to be able to show that it's only true lifting with your knees if you're getting your butt under where it's supposed to be and then lifting straight up. So one of the things I suggest when you're lifting something like this is, again, getting really close to the weight, getting your center of gravity set, bending your knees, and then lifting as all one part. One of the biggest mistakes that people will make when lifting is that they'll keep their knees straight and they're going to be lifting with their back. What that does is that hyperextends the back. It puts a lot of strain on the muscles. So I'm going to put Hugo in a position that kind of shows you that poor lifting position. So if he's just going to lift with his knees straight and then pulling that straight back up, what he would do is that he would end up hyperextending his lower back. It puts a lot of strain on the disc. It may not be that one time, but over a long enough period of time, it's going to catch up. So now that we got this large weight on the ground, I also want to show you how to be able to better manage it over obstacles that are on the ground. What we don't want to do is we don't want to have our backs hyperextend in order to pull something over. Because again, if you're going to hyperextend your back, you're going to end up causing injury to either spasming out the muscles or even worse, the disc. So you still have to bend your knees, stabilize the weight, and then pull it over, all in one motion. So now what I'm doing is I'm using my legs in order to do that instead of my back. Now Hugo, if you could just demonstrate what I just showed you. Perfect lift. So now we have a heavy item here that's laying flat, and this is a good point to make where if you have something that's like this, it's to lift it in stages. And so what we want to do is we want to take something that's flat like this and actually stand it up so that the weight's taller now. And it's a lot easier to get under it. So Rick's going to take this heavy flange, stand it up, and then now he's going to prepare to lift it. And turning his body all at once and not just his upper torso in order to put it up onto the bed. A recommendation I would make for lifting something that's large and then also top heavy, or just something that's oddly shaped, is to have somebody else there to help you with it in order to share the weight, but then also to help stabilize the weight. So I'm going to show you how to lift this up with a two-man lift onto a truck bed. It may seem a better idea to have both people down on the ground and lifting straight up, but then something that's very top heavy could get away from you and cause an injury. So that's why we're having somebody that's on the bottom and then somebody that's on the ledge where the item is going in order to help stabilize it and share in the weight. So as you can see, they're both squatting with their legs, lifting up, sharing in that weight, and then Rick's up here on top of the bed just to be able to stabilize it. So that way nothing's getting away from you and everybody still has control over that weight.
In this scenario, we have a jackhammer here, which is heavy, awkward, and should be a two-man lift. And we want to make sure if we're moving that jackhammer from somewhere on our job site to put it away at the end of the day in the back of a truck, we want to make sure that that path is clear and open to our guys that are traveling it. So it's very important to keep good housekeeping on your job site for reasons exactly like this, where we're lifting things that are awkward and possibly heavy, and we want to make sure that we have a clear path available to us to go where our destination is.
So here's another example of a two-man lift, but instead of going from the ground up, we're going to actually show you how to bring it from a height down. It's just as important. People can get hurt during this process. So the reason why we have somebody that's up on the top instead of both of them down here is, again, just to be able to stabilize that weight as it comes down. They're still both sharing in the weight, but at least now we have a lot more stability of that weight.
So another one of the items that we see guys make common mistakes with is the plywood and shoring board. Plywood, even if it's a 1/4 inch, is still going to be over 40 pounds, and it's also awkward. If guys try to lift it on their own, it can catch wind and turn into a sail, and it's going to leave you in a bad spot. So we want guys to execute a two-man lift anytime they're lifting plywood of any kind. Another thing to consider that's very important when you're executing a lift of plywood is you want to have communication between the two guys that are doing the lift. It's pretty easy if it gets too heavy and a guy loses his grip, and that's going to jar. If he ends up dropping it, that's going to jar the other guy and leave him at risk of injury. So we want to make sure that when we're doing the lift, There's communication between both parties, and both guys are carrying it about waist level, 2 hands on it, and you want to make sure you're carrying that plywood flat. If you carry it upright, again, that wind, get a gust of wind and you're going to leave those guys in a bad spot. Could get jarred or put themselves at risk of injury.
It's obvious Electric Conduit cares about your guys' health out on the field. They've brought a team physician on in order to help protect you through those things. And it's not just for the moment, it's for the longevity of your career. One of the things I want to make sure is that you don't let an ache turn into an injury. An ache is very treatable, it's easy, it's minimal amount of effort in order to make that go away, but then we're also making sure that that's not going to turn into a chronic injury. Not only do you get chronic injuries just in that one area, but you could also be developing compensatory injuries in other areas that just have to make up for that one small little thing. So if you do have an ache, bring it up. It's exactly what I'm here for. It's exactly why they've brought me on to do, is to make sure that I can stop that from becoming something that becomes a big problem.
Thank you guys for your time. We hope you found this video helpful. And thank you, Dr. O, for participating. Appreciate it very much. Be safe out there.